So welcome, everyone. I would like, first and foremost, to pass it over to David Whiteside at Destination BC for the territorial acknowledgements as well as the partners introduction. David, whenever you are ready.
Thanks, Margot. And yeah, welcome everyone. Super excited to be here for this workshop. I am lucky enough to be living and working in the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation, who have been the stewards of this land that I'm living on since time immemorial. And I could not be more honored and humbled to be here. I'm lucky enough that when I look out my window, I have a beautiful view of Inchkai, which some of you may know as Mount Garibaldi, which I know many of us here living in the shadow of this place are feel very lucky to be here. So um, with that, I will tell you a little bit about the BC TCRI briefly, or the BC Tourism Climate Resiliency Initiative. So we are a partnership of Destination BC, Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport, and Indigenous Tourism BC, as well as our regional partners, including, as you can see from some of the logos below me here, Northern BC, Thompson Okanagan, Vancouver Coast Mountains, Vancouver Island, Caribou Chilcotin Coast, and Kootenay Rockies. We're working together in this initiative to build a tourism industry that is resilient to climate change and adopting sustainability initiatives. And obviously the topic today is such an important one because there's so much to learn from our Indigenous partners in this space and how their knowledge and everything can really forward this initiative, these initiatives. So super lucky to be here and happy to be here. And I will turn it over to the folks who are doing the presentation, and you don't have to listen to me talk about this anymore.
Thank you very much, David. I appreciate it. I would like to mention that this workshop has been created in partnership between Synergy Enterprises and the Travel Foundation. So Synergy Enterprises is a corporate sustainability management firm based in Victoria, BC, which we specialize in climate action, sustainable tourism, emission reduction solutions. The Travel Foundation is an international sustainable tourism organization dedicated to ensuring that tourism has a positive impact on destination. I would also like to introduce myself. My name is Margot Martin, and I'm a project manager at Synergy Enterprises. I'm joining you today from the beautiful Ucluelet First Nation traditional territory. As we're getting started, we'd also love to hear from you in the chat. Please feel free to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're joining us from, your community, and the organization that you represent. Finally, a reminder that this is the fourth workshop in a series of 7. So we hope you will join us for subsequent topics and more information to come at the end of this presentation. I also want to mention that today I have the pleasure to co-facilitate this workshop with Chatman Shaw, Corporate Services Lead at Indigenous Tourism BC. Thank you, Chatman, for joining us today. Synergy and the Travel Foundation would like to extend their sincere thank you to Indigenous Tourism BC, Chatman Shaw, and all the Indigenous tourism operators who have helped, supported, and participated in the creation of this workshop, as well as the video and resource pertaining to this program. So your knowledge and involvement were paramount to the success of this collaboration. For our agenda today, here's what you can expect for the next hour. So we will be talking about Indigenous knowledge. What is Indigenous knowledge? And dive a little bit more about definitions. We'll have also an overview of what Indigenous knowledge means when applied to climate resilience. And we will show you some examples of Indigenous knowledge in practice within the BC's tourism industry. For our guest speaker today, we have the tremendous pleasure to welcome James Cowper from Haida Style Expedition, and we'll have in a little activity where James will talk a little bit more about Haida Style Expeditions, and you will also be able to ask all the questions that you want to James. Now, I would like to pass it over to Chatman to introduce us to a little bit more about Indigenous knowledge. Chatman, whenever you are ready.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Margot. Really excited and happy to be here today. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the conversations with James here, and of course, the Ask the Expert. So as we roll, questions again are welcomed in the chat. So let's get to it. Indigenous knowledge, listen, learn, and understand. So when we move on to the next slide here, what we're going to look at is kind of just an overview of British Columbia as a whole, as far as First Nations representation. So some of the latest data that we see is we've got recorded 205 First Nations communities within the province of British Columbia, speaking 36 different languages with over 60 plus dialects. The cultural richness and diversity in British Columbia is unmatched across Canada and has definitely makes it the most diverse makeup within the country. Since then, the population, we're nearly 6% of BC's population overall, representing 6% of Canada's total, 16% of Canada's total Indigenous population, which is significant for us here. But diving a little bit deeper into the tourism-specific numbers around Indigenous tourism, in the province of British Columbia, we have 505 Indigenous tourism businesses in operation. Across the province, all 6 tourism regions, we have 505 going strong right now. And also of note, and this is probably one of my favorite statistics anyways that we have, of the 205 First Nations communities in British Columbia, 163 of them are signed up with ITBC as a member. So that means 163 First Nations communities in the province are really interested in tourism. And what really speaks to that more is that of those 163 nations, 153 of them do own at least one Indigenous tourism business. So we're at almost a 1-to-1 ratio in that aspect. So that is really fantastic. So again, 80% of all First Nations communities in BC are interested in tourism. So it's a really big step forward for us. All right, moving right on to the next slide, Margot. We're going to dive into and share some links within the chat for you as well to just get a little bit deeper understanding of what the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People is. And when we think of this, I just, very high level, Indigenous peoples have the right to practice and revitalize their cultural traditions and customs. And as mentioned, to really dig deeper into that and, outlining the 4 key principles set forth through UNDRIP is primarily the right to self-determination. This one's, to me, I think the biggest one. Economic sovereignty, driving our economies within our own communities is huge. The right to be recognized as distinct peoples, and we're seeing that through the province of British Columbia with the distinctions-based approach that is being taken by the province of British Columbia. The right to be free, prior and informed consent, the right to be free from discrimination. These are all very important. And again, we're going to share these links with you. And I do highly encourage you to dig into that document a bit deeper, see how you can, apply these and integrate these into your operations and even your day-to-day. In tandem, we're going to talk about the United Nations. Now, I always almost get this one wrong. United Nations Education Scientific I missed it, organization. But when we talk about this one here, the grand overview is how we're impacting the Sustainable Development Goal 13 of climate action outlined by UNESCO, local and Indigenous knowledge systems. Local and Indigenous knowledge systems contribute to the achievement of this goal of climate action by observing changing climates and adapting to impacts and contributing to global emissions mitigation efforts. Climate change impacts are already being seen in shaping lives and livelihoods of human rights of over 370 million Indigenous peoples worldwide. Indigenous peoples have sustained themselves throughout this with their ability to work with nature and climate variance, and relying primarily on precipitation patterns, temperature variances, and the biodiversity that sustains themselves over these long periods of times. So again, we're going to share that link in the chat, so please feel free to dive into that a bit more to gain a bit more understanding around that initiative and the action being taken towards Sustainable Development Goal 13 on climate action. All right, now this next slide here is an important one. So Indigenous knowledge is a term that represents the understanding of information unique to Indigenous peoples. Indigenous knowledge is integral to the cultural systems that also encompass language and systems of classifications, resource use practices, social interactions, rituals and spirituality, ceremony. It's the cumulative body of knowledge, know-how, practices, and representations within each of the 205 unique First Nations in British Columbia. This body of knowledge is maintained and developed by peoples with extended histories of interactions with the natural environment, These sophisticated sets of understandings, interpretations, meanings are part of cultural patterns that encompass language, naming, classification systems, resource use practices, spirituality, and worldviews. The unique ways of knowing are important facets to the world's cultural diversity and provide a foundation for locally appropriate sustainable development. It's holistic, it's cumulative, it's dynamic information collected by generations of Indigenous peoples. It's everything that our culture is, built on historical experiences, adaptive to social, economic, environmental, spiritual, and political change, inclusive of physical and metaphysical worlds linked by moral code, trust of inherited wisdom, practical experimentation, qualitative oral record. The history is that we are a very oral history, and that's why we have knowledge keepers and elders who are so important to our communities, and sharing that with the youth, with the adults, and just sharing within community, and hopefully sharing some experience into that history through tourism as well. All right. Traditional ecological knowledge. Now, this knowledge includes the relationship between people, plants, animals, natural phenomena, landscapes, and the timing of events for activities such as hunting, fishing, trapping, agriculture, and forestry. Everything that connects the people to the place and the land. It encompasses the worldview of people, of Indigenous peoples in British Columbia, the human and animal relationships, and so much more. This body of knowledge is maintained and developed by peoples with extended histories of interactions with natural environment. These sophisticated sets of understandings are part of the cultural patterns, again, that encompasses the language, naming, and classification systems that we use. These unique ways of knowing are important facets to the world's cultural diversity and provide the foundation for locally appropriate sustainable development. After this workshop here, we're going to release some resources, and I really want to highlight this video coming up that we've worked with Jenna Bauer and the Inkmeep Desert Cultural Center and the Osoyoos Indian Band around this. It's phenomenal. So great resource upcoming, and look forward to seeing that video as well. And we'll move on to the next slide here. While Indigenous peoples are widely acknowledged to be highly vulnerable to the impacts of cultural change, their unique knowledge systems and experiences remain vastly underrepresented in discourse surrounding climate change, impacts, and particularly solutions for the future. So that quote brought to you by Macondo and Thomas in 2018. This one, it's important. Indigenous history in BC is deeply rooted in climate resilience throughout the ages since time immemorial. Incorporating Indigenous knowledge into environmental assessment practices, protections, it creates ways of knowing and being, as well as a larger database of information that is geared towards land stewardship in the end. Indigenous knowledge provides holistic, integrated approaches towards the environments and how we maintain our lands and be stewards. We all understand that we have a vested interest in this growing sector in Indigenous tourism, and building these relationships with Indigenous communities and building more Indigenous knowledge in the tourism industry practices are key to the overall success of the industry and across the province. Thank you, Margot. So here we go. So we got some, as mentioned, some examples for you around Indigenous knowledge being applied into climate resilience throughout the province. Couple great ones here coming up. So actually, before we jump into that, this is a really great quote that we found, and I wanted to thank Margot for sharing this one with me. I hadn't come across it before. Comprising of less than 5% of the world's population, Indigenous peoples protect 80% of global biodiversity. That is significant. And I mean, just looking at the province of British Columbia alone, when you think about just the north and not thinking about the other 6 regions and the northern BC is one of the vastest regions we have, and probably one of the most populous regions for Indigenous and First Nations people in the province. They maintain such a vast amount of land. It's truly remarkable, the impact that they have on their communities and the lands in their territories. As mentioned, some examples of this here. We wanted to get into some Indigenous fire and water stewardship, as these are the primary examples that we really can touch on here. So Indigenous fire stewardship promotes the use of cultural burning. Cultural burning is important cultural practices that enhances ecosystem biodiversity, assists with the management of complex resources, and reduces the risk of wildfire and reducing vegetation. As opposed to prescribed fire, cultural burning is Indigenous-led, has cultural objectives, and Indigenous knowledge-driven within traditional fire ignition methods. So it is a controlled way of knowing, and it's a shared and a process that's passed down through that community, through the knowledge keepers. As an example of this fire stewardship is the partnership between Parks Canada and Indigenous peoples in Canada. Since the establishment of the Indigenous Fire Circle in April 2023, the Indigenous Fire Circle is providing advice, identifies opportunities to Parks Canada in regards to Indigenous engagement, as well as Indigenous-led cultural burning. So potential Indigenous fire guardians projects and the ways Park Canada currently approaches fire suppression, including cultural safety. So these are all really important examples of cultural practice being put to use through provincial systems to help mitigate climate action and climate change within certain areas of the province to otherwise avoid wildfires. Another example is the Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas, IPCAs, are key conservation tools that can empower First Nations stewardship responsibilities over our lands and our waters. In 2018, Indigenous Circle of Experts, ICE, report made key recommendations to supporting implementations to the IPCAs as a means to further Indigenous reconciliation in Canada, while contributing to the Government of Canada's conservation targets in the long run. Progress has been made since then to support establishing Indigenous protected and conserved areas on land. However, work in marine areas continues to lag. And this is where a lot of work needs to be done moving forward. And there's no explicit legal recognition for IPCAs in any federal, provincial, or territorial protected areas legislated in Canada. So we are going to share some links as well around that within, but it's around water stewardship, fire stewardship. So all really great examples of Indigenous knowledge in practice to further climate resilience and mitigation tactics. The three principles of Indigenous knowledge being applied to climate resiliency. So there's three key principles here. So the stewardship of the land, of course, so stewardship of the land is a pillar of Indigenous knowledge. Again, since time immemorial, Indigenous peoples have been taking care of their lands and making sure that it's, humans and that relationship between the land and the humans is at the forefront of their actions. Indigenous knowledge transmission. So again, the transfer of knowledge, we are a very driven community on oral history and driven by the 7 generations principle. So again, these are seven principles we can live by. We put into action through knowledge systems and, through our actions as people, I guess you could say, and how we conduct ourselves. The 7 generation principle is based on ancient methods and philosophy that decisions were made today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations from now. So again, keeping that 7 principles, 7 generations, all at the forefront of that and understanding where we're going for the next 7 generations. The intersectionality of storytelling. Climate change and climate disruptions lead to a decline in emotional, spiritual, and socio-cultural well-being. Storytelling has been used to share Indigenous knowledge with local populations, visitors, non-Indigenous tourism operators, and just to understand changes, prevent and mitigate them. Storytelling is an integral part and one thing at ITBC that we're really working on to help facilitate the promotion and guidance along the way that we can, working with elders and knowledge keepers to develop a workshop internally to work with First Nations communities to host storytelling workshops, leading to hopefully tourism experiences that communities can really engage in, where they see culture they deem suitable to share within those experiences. So that storytelling is such a key aspect within Indigenous knowledge and ties into climate resiliency as well as tourism in so many facets. Indigenous knowledge in practice. All right. So Spirit Bear Lodge, we really wanted to highlight a few of the operations within British Columbia. Spirit Bear Lodge, connect, respect, protect. Build an understanding, respect, and connection to the heart of the Great Bear Rainforest and a culture that has roots as deep as its trees. Truly a magnificent space, place. People are amazing. The culture is rich, built on authentic cultural experiences that create emotional connections between nature and wildlife. Spirit Bear Lodge is one of those true leaders in storytelling as well. The staff from the staff from the top down to the experiences you can have within that area, truly authentic and driven by the First Peoples in that area. More than just a vacation, it's a journey that will intertwine guests with this special place. It's just a story, and it's a place who continues to protect it for future generations. Again, the 7 generations at work here at the Spirit Bear Lodge. The next example we're going to go into is Tribal Parks and Allies. So on Vancouver Island, the Teleoquiet Tribal Park Guardians. This is a program that's been in development and in operation for about 5 years now. Truly remarkable program in the sense that they've established a visitor stewardship fee of sorts based on a welcoming and voluntary protocol entered by businesses within the area that contributes to the First Nations community directly. They steward the land. They've been doing it since time immemorial. It's one of my favorite examples I like to talk about. And going a little bit further through the ESOC pledge as well. This one's just as important. Much like in Greenland or the Icelandic pledge, the Haida Gwaii pledge, actually, James, I just wanted to point that one out too. Like, these are avenues and pledges visitors make when they go to these lands to respect the nature, respect the land, and respect the people, and leave a positive impact. Net positive impact is really what we're going there, driven for in this. And one last thing we wanted to highlight in this is the Na'u Feast, the Feast Together, truly a one-of-a-kind event in the province of British Columbia and across Canada. I had the chance to take this in this past year on the premiere, actually, and it was a truly amazing learning experience. You learn about the Teleoquiet First Nation in a way that is presented and approved by the nation. They share their history, the trials and tribulations of everything along the way, and they share it over food. One of the most important pieces of our culture, in Indigenous culture, is food. Engaging in a feast, engaging in learning. It's truly a one-of-a-kind experience, the Na'u Feast out of Tofino, Nassix. And it's delivered at the Best Western Tin Whist Lodge through their convention center there. It's 100% authentic Indigenous experience from the food to the dancers to the stories they tell. Truly remarkable. The Northern Indigenous Tourism Lodge Network. So this is a really great community-based tourism program driven throughout the northwest of Canada that has been enabling the development strategy made up of unique lodges within participating Indigenous people. So really creating an itinerary or route-based experience driven by Indigenous peoples and operations and tourism businesses along the way. Based on regenerative values, Indigenous principles, worldviews, and ways of being, the network highlights that along the way and really showcases it in a way that is unique and innovative and really look future forward. These lodges may share diverse local Indigenous heritage while acting as a guidepost for sustainable, culturally immersive Indigenous tourism experiences. Again, really working with the First Nations and the communities along the way to highlight those authentic experiences. So I recommend highly checking this out. Just looking at the network, seeing what it's driven on, the values, the foundation of it. Really great network and great initiative. All right, the moment we've all been waiting for.
Thank you very much, Chadman.
I'm going to pass it to Margot here. Thank you, Margot. And James, looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Chadman, for all this information about Indigenous knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, what it means, how it is so deep-rooted in our the tourism industry in BC, and how we showcase it and we try to transmit it as much as we can. So today we are moving to the next half of this presentation, and for today's workshop activity, we have the pleasure to welcome James Cowper as our guest speaker for this session. Hello, James, and I would like to introduce you a little bit. James is the CEO of Haida Style Expeditions. Haida Style Expedition is a Haida own and operate cultural adventure and fishing expeditions company on Haida Gwaii that shares Haida Gwaii's culture, stories, and history. James, if you'd like to introduce yourself, I will now pass it over to you to tell us about your experience on sharing Indigenous knowledge to visitors on Haida Gwaii. And whenever you're ready, James, we are looking forward to hearing your stories.
Oh, thank you. Singit greetings, everyone, and a big thank you, Hawa, to Mr. Chapman for his energy. So my Haida name is Flickerbird, and my English Scottish name is James Cowper. I like the heading CEO. That being said, you can see a lot of my eagle down and white hair in that picture. Hawa. I am an eagle, so as many of you know, if you're not aware, our two moieties in Haida culture are the eagle and raven. We follow our mothers. My clan is Jaw, so our main crest is the five-fin sea monster. We reside from the west coast, and here where I sit within our village as we speak, Kailanis, sea lion town here and just outside of Skidegate. Right now the tide is low and the table is set, so when we talk sustainability, there's people walking in amongst the eelgrass, learning about the various clams and the interconnectivity of our ocean and our diet as a people, and then sharing it with others visiting. We've just had 2 boats head out to Guayhanas today, and we're hosting visitors from the north that are looking at similar protection, whether it be through a park reserve or a collaboration with the provincial federal governments. My brother and I'm co-owner. My brother Sean, he's off on the water today. We own Haida Style Expeditions, and as we like to tell stories in our culture, we started the business back in 2013, but all throughout our lives grew up on the water and shared experiences with friends and family members amongst the years. And as many of you are aware, if not, Guayhanas is now 30 years in the making, in terms of when the agreement was first signed, and the Haida-ness came out where we said, hey, there needs to be a Haida-owned and operated company operating. And so we started, the premise behind Haida Style Expeditions was to create opportunities for youth, and more importantly, to transition into a tourism economy for our people, both Haida and Haida Gwaii alike. So I like to make mention of our neighbors that live amongst us, and if you put up with us for more than 10 years, you deem the title of a Haida Gwaii, and they're greatly appreciated. A lot of our brothers and sisters. In creating Haida Style, everything involves yakudang, and that's our first principle, which is respect for all living things. And when we talk about sustainability, we talk about conservation, we also have to understand what that means, whether it's the responsibility, the accountability, and the outcome following. And as many of you are aware, if not, our business operates in Guayhanas. Guayhanas is, the meaning of Guayhanas is Islands of Beauty, but in accordance to the world stage, it's known as Guayhanas National Park Reserve, Marine Conservation Area Reserve, and Haida Heritage Site. So we simplify things, Guayhanas, Islands of Beauty. And we each within the site, we have our village sites. And like you've heard earlier in the presentation with Poet Nation, that we have the Haida Gwaii Watchman program. And then you have the Lake Central Coast, you're getting the Coastal Guardian program. And so I don't necessarily like to refer to them as programs, but stewards, mind you, and their job is to protect the cultural integrity of the sites, the eyes and ears, and assist new visitors as they come. And within Haida Style, we have a diverse team that offers various facets. So we're offering an experience, and that being said, we have one of our captains, Glenn McLeod, to mention names. Last year, he planted his 1,000,000th cedar tree. And so you've got that forestry and silviculture background, whereas my brother and I, we bring the fishing and the arts background, and we bring youth into the picture that bring cultural knowledge. And so we all share, and as we've learned earlier, we're just knowledge keepers, and our responsibility is to pass that on to the next generation. And that's one of our founding principles, is mentorship within our company, so that we want to be able to pass the knowledge on to the youth and also the opportunity. We've been operating now for 8 strong years. What started out as a hobby has been a successful nightmare, as I like to call it, which is great from various demographics. So when we share the experiences, we're sharing with the baby boom generation, the Nenais, the Chinais, we like to call them in Haida. Chinai and Skiddy dialect is grandfather, and Nenai is grandmother, and our northern brothers and sisters up in Kyle in Masset area is Nani and Chinny. And so from our Nenais and Chinais to our youth and the families, Haida Gwaii is quite a unique place. And what makes it unique is, or not so unique, is the fact that we only have 2 air carriers that you can fly, Pacific Coastal Air Canada, or you can catch lovely BC ferries. That being said, people plan to come here, and we understand that. And from a company perspective, we want to work toward delivering an experience that's education and strongly focused on our cultural values. You know, when I spoke earlier of Yakudang, respect for all living things, well, what does that mean? You know, we hear of ownership. Well, the land owns us, and our responsibility is to conduct ourselves accordingly so that, you know, we have trees, we have fish for future generations. We're people of the ocean, and intrinsic to our culture is the salmon. And when we talk about climate change, and we're all experiencing it in one way, shape, or form. And right now we have pockets of pools of water, mind you, in many of our rivers, and we're doing often we hear of we'll do the sun dance. Well, in our case, we're praying for liquid sunshine. So the rains will come so that the salmon can then spawn. It's been a wonderful experience to share with you all, and we're very grateful, going back to the successful nightmare part, that Haida Style Expeditions being, you know, we're proudly say that we were the first Haida owned and operated company that still exists and still moves forward in Guayhanas. We also have the likes of the Council of Haida Nation through our Economic Development Corporation, HICO, Haida Enterprise Corporation, with Haida House, and soon to open Ocean House. And so our model is based on community tourism. That being said, is we're not going to build a hotel for you to stay in, but we're going to find somebody that we know that shares like-mindedness and prides itself on delivering that level of education that you can stay with. And so we have many partners out there. And as I named Haida House earlier, we have Haida Gwaii Glamping Company, just to name a few. And that we're all working collectively together, both on the tour experience aspect and the fishing as well. There's a principle that we like to pride ourselves in when we do go fishing. It's catch and keep, and it's learning about the male, female aspects of catching halibut and the breeders and what have you. And so we take you through all the steps, and all that knowledge, once again, has been passed to us as little kids working on salmon trawlers in the summer to the various jobs throughout the seasonality of living and working here on Haida Gwaii. And so it's been very rewarding, to say the least. I'm a proud father of 2 daughters. Maya Elizabeth, my oldest, is 21 this year. She started with us last year, and I hope at one point, we hope, both my brother and I, that, you know, we'll leave a legacy for our kids, or if not, perhaps merge our company into a cooperative that's community owned so that it continues to share those experiences. And so having Maya on board this summer, her first year guiding was, she did a wonderful job, and she's more charming than her dad. And that being said, it means a lot. And so our model is, often you'll find amongst many operators that you'll have one guide that takes care of you the whole day. Well, we happen to have 2 to 3. And the reason for that is, number one, safety is our number one priority. We've often been heckled because you'll be visiting me in the inlet here at the local wharf and dodging gates and say, well, it's nice in the inlet. And then I'll point to the horizon. Well, you see the the mountains there that protects us from all the wind direction. And then watch for lunchtime. The winds will come in, and then later on we'll run into those people because it's a small town. We have 4,300 people between 7 communities. So even if you spent the day on Haida Gwaii, the likelihood is we'll bump into you in one way or another. Yeah, sit here and talk your ears off till they bleed. That being said, down to some of the specifics, we work closely with the Haida Gwaii Watchman program. Again, educating, sharing knowledge. This year, we were grateful to receive a grant, and we thought, well, how could we use this grant that's going to benefit and help provide that messaging that we all adopt? And we created storyboards. So there were storyboards developed for both the village of Kuna, Skadans, as it's referred to, and Tanu, which is referred. And that really helped out both the watchmen this year and visitors coming to each site, because often there's this conception that there's longhouses still standing and frontals, although there's remnants of, many have been taken to museums. It's an added value-added bonus to many of our interpretive services each company offers. And so for Gwaii Honasan itself, there's 3 locals. We're one, the other's Moresby Explorers. And we have also a local kayaking company. And then the brunt of the operators, the other 95% or so, operate out of Victoria, Vancouver area. And so the opportunity locals, our network's quite small locally. But having said that, we work closely with all our visitors and operators as well. That's open to questions here. That being said, Kawa, Mr. Chapman and Synergy, and I could sit here, like I said, and talk and talk and talk. But that being said, I'll pass it on.
And I would love
Sometimes I could just
to
keep
listen.
listening, James. Yeah.
Exactly, Chapman. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, James, for all those information and the sharing about your experience on Haida Gwaii. And as you said, I'm sure there's a lot of people, participants of this workshop today that have some questions for you. So I would like to move to our next part of the workshop, that is Ask the Expert. James, I'm sure there is a lot of questions for you. If any participant would like to open their mic and ask questions to James, feel free to do so. We have around 10 to 15 minutes. You can also put your questions in the chat if you prefer to write your questions. I have a very quick question for you, James. I'll be very interested to understand how you have seen the impact of climate change on Haida Gwaii those last years. How did it affect the community, and how did you manage to create new experiences with Haida style expeditions? How this has affected your business?
That's a good question. Thank you. First off, one always reflects as a small business owner on their season. And that being said, every year we take time to reevaluate. We're not perfect. We're our strengths, where our weaknesses. The price of fuel, also a contributor to climate change, as we all know. So we run a adventure tourism company. We do day tours. In the past, we've hosted overnight excursions, and we're now looking at offering that moving into 2025 to add value, offer more quality and authenticity. Often you're with us 8 to 10 hours in the day, but more importantly, address that fuel consumption aspect. We're, like I mentioned earlier, right now the rivers are quite dry, and we're all keeping an eye on them and praying for more liquid sunshine. As an operator as well, we've adjusted to kind of climatize to a lot of the the regulations that come into play. That being said, the fire bans, we even have them here on Haida Gwaii, even though we're a rainforest. So we run portable barbecues that run on propane, to being mindful. Now, often in the off season, we're involved in marine debris cleanup. Right now, they're hosting another one here in Haida Gwaii. And so the last thing people want to see is water bottles. So the policy we have is we carry large jugs of water so that we're not handing out individual bottled water. And right down from the cutlery to the cups, we use as much recycling product as we can. For example, this year we moved into less tinfoil. Although I used to tease guests and say we have stocks in Elcan, you know, you get a chuckle. That being said, we have to be mindful about our waste and our footprint. But just to set the tone for people, we're just one piece of the puzzle, and what makes Haida Style successful is the work of the efforts of the Council of the Haida Nation, working in conjunction with the province and the federal governments. Gwaii being the one example, managed by the Archipelago Management Board, which is consists of the Haida, DFO, and Parks Canada. And DFO's involvement stems from the Marine Conservation Area Reserve to the 11 conservancies outside of Gwaii that look at the forestry carbon credit revenue generation that's going to build on, and you're starting to see around the province of the collaboration amongst First Nations and local communities. But back to Haida Style, every effort's made, and then you can introduce, you know, maintenance of equipment, right down to the nitty-gritties. We're being mindful of turnaround, whether it be our engines to the products we use. For example, although I'd love to have Arc'teryx jackets for everybody that defines us at the site, we have wool vests that were made locally with crests, both the eagle and raven, for example. And that also adds value and is part of the aspect of our storytelling. So from our clothing to our cutlery to the equipment we use. But this year alone, going back to the considering overnights, the weather. So back to safety. So in the old days, we'd see 8-hour, 10-hour turnarounds in weather. Nowadays, you're seeing it in 6. So what's necessarily reported at 9 a.m. could drastically change by the afternoon. And so being a little too over-reliant on the apps that exist, again, that's where traditional knowledge comes into play too. You look at the horizon, what's it telling you? What's its color? What are the clouds doing? I used to joke around, the only science I did in university was meteorology. And so that also helped. So right down from weather to the equipment we use, we now run 2 landing craft that are aluminum. They're required to be surveyed every 3 years. So it's just regular maintenance regimes. In the off season, I work for Canadian Coast Guard, so it's pretty easy to adapt some of those policies and procedures to the stuff we do with Haida style expeditions. And more importantly, when we talk from the people aspect, investing right off the bat, it's fair wage and it's incentivized, and the onus is put on the individual to then, you know, you have an opportunity for growth. But from the trees to the water, from the weather, when it comes to climate change, you know, you could drive up the highway to Masset right now, and it's wintertime. The king tides are starting to come, and I'm thinking, will the road be there next year? To within Gwaii right now, we're just seeing low water levels. And how we help out there is when the watchman camps are low on water, we have the ability to bring water to them. And it's just being mindful, those small little steps, doing the best we can. We're just a small operation. We run 2 vessels. We have a staff of 10 during the season. The off season, we're available to then assist you if you happen to come visit us and BC Ferries cancels its fun to Moresby Camp, because there's 2 islands. Both we have Graham in the north and and Moresby in the south. But when there's a northeast that comes anything over 25 knots in the inlet, they'll stand down due to their safety. But we're able to work with Moresby Explorers, and they gather a van on the other side of the island, and we run you over safely, and we get you to your plane so that you don't miss it and have to reschedule. So we're adapting as best we can, but that's due in part with the network and a lot of teamwork and just working with one another, and that's key. So if there's operators that need provisions to supplies, and we happen to be doing a trip, we can assist as best we can. So it's kind of an effort. But when it comes to the overall impacts of climate change, unfortunately, they're yet to come, but we're well aware of the circumstances and the situation. I don't know if many of you are aware, Haida Gwaii is quite unique, and we also have as we'd like to say in our tours, a dirty little secret. So when you look at Talal on the map, Talal North, on Graham Island is 100% diesel generation, and Talal South, it's 70% hydro, and the balance is picked up in the gen station in Sanspit on Moresby Island. So when we talk energy in climate change on island, there's a big effort, and it's being supported through the Council of Haida Nation through societies like Stewardship that are developing policies. Just to share with you, energy is subsidized now. 2019 dollars was around 19.1 million. And it's safe to say with the fuel prices that hiked 35% in the last 4 years, that it's significantly higher. So when it comes to wintertime here on Haida Gwaii, I believe we're burning in the tune of between 8,000 to 10,000 liters a day and to keep the lights on. However, I burn wood, so kind of digressing away from your points, but when it comes to as a company, it's just being mindful of the products we have that can, play a yet small role in a larger worldview, if you will. But as far as climate goes, we've seen weather patterns we haven't seen in some time. We've developed safety policies to address it as best we can. That being said, our forests are quite dry right now. So when we're hiking through, it's quite gray instead of green. And it's starting to rain now. So hopefully we have a pink year and chum. So they're waiting, pooling, and the bears, they have a smorgasbord right there with little to no energy. They can take a swipe and take 3 or 4 fish out in one. But it's not all doom and gloom, mind you. That being said, there's efforts being done, and through Sweetweed and the likes of some of the smaller operators, Yorbrook Energy, to name a few, they're looking at tidal energy. There's also wind options. So it's a work in progress here in Haida Gwaii, and we hope to share that with the rest of the province and Canada and the world in the coming years.
Thank you very
For the
much,
question,
James.
I don't know if it was specific to, but there's certain aspects that we run into on a daily basis.
It was really well explained, and we really appreciate how you really go deep into the correlation between climate change and how do we adapt, and how Indigenous knowledge kind of bridges the gap as well, which is really important. I would like to keep the questions open. If there is any participant that would like to ask questions to James, we have a few more minutes. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions. We will still have a few minutes. Or put your question in the chat as well, if you prefer. We have a shy crowd today, it seems.
I'm going to jump in quick here if I can, James. And one question I have for you is, I know you've talked about working with the Coast Guard and the coordinated efforts through the Guardians and the Coastal Guardians, and just highlighting some of the work that they're doing around Haida Gwaii. Yeah, just wondering if you could share a bit of that information or stories
Absolutely.
around that.
So thank you, because I was just going to add a little flavor here. But when we talk about each watchman site, whether it be Puna, Tanu, we have families with the opportunity to bring their children down.
Nice.
and spend short periods of up to 2 weeks. And we have some that, as I like to tease, one of our elder watchmen, Reg Wesley, that turn into go-geets because they spend 3.5 months down there to 4 months, him and Gord at Windy Bay, and then Cuddlecan Guayai, Hot Springs, to down to Skungwai, our UNESCO World Heritage Site. So each of these sites, through the efforts of organizations like Sliwaleed, to mention once again, are all connected to solar power.
Okay.
And so talking about our fuel consumption, that's, I think, as an island, we're addressing that as best we can. We're well aware that, of our use, how can we get the best value, and more importantly, reduce year by year our consumption. Climate change has impacted us significantly. You'll see the picture of Skungwai there. Well, you see all those second growth spruce, some standing 100 years, are now gone. So we've had winds in excess of 130, 140 kilometers switchback, meaning they're coming
That's
from two
incredible.
directions at once.
Yeah.
But in this case, all those trees were wiped out, and there was little to no impact on the standing mortuary, as you see in the picture there. So when you come visit, those trees are no longer standing because they were all blown down at a winter storm some years back, and Guayhana staff have worked diligently with the Haida Gwaii Watchmen to mitigate and protect a lot of the impacts. And in some cases, most of our villages, if we have windfall, you're going to find remains of ancestors, because back in the time, there they lay, villages were abandoned, and the overburden covered them over time, and that young tree grew into a mature tree generations later. I see a little hand up there at the top. I'll stop being Lapdaga, which means chatty in Haida. Ask away, my friend.
Wendell, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go, and Jamie, I guess you can. I'll be quick. So thank you so much for sharing, James, about your work, and just such an amazing place. And one of my questions is really around thinking about climate change, but also just behavior change, and how the experience you are providing your guests, how you're approaching it. Some of the research I've really been interested in is how it changes your guests' behavior once they move on and go back home, and how that valuing of the place that you've shared with them might be a catalyst for sort of a longer behavior change. And I wonder, have you had any feedback around, while you're interacting with your customers, your guests, how they're responding to place, and maybe a sense of stewardship or a sense of value that they're going to carry with them.
Thank you. Brings to mind one, and that being said, there's hope. We often hear that from our elder demographic, the baby boomers, and in sharing the knowledge that was passed down to us, for example, whether it be fishing, catch what you can keep, don't, try not to waste. We've had many of the baby boom demographics from the likes of groups from Anderson Vacations and Mile Zero and what have you, some local charter groups that come up, and the mean age is, with all due respect, is well into the late 70s, walk away with a feeling of pride. And they're not only hearing it, whether it be from myself, they're hearing it from the youth. And that's offering a lot of hope. And that's where we start, is we start with our youth. We're only sharing how we've learned to coexist with nature. And yes, we've had logging on Haida Gwaii. Yes, we've had a fishing industry that once was, and so on and so forth. And when we move into tourism, the Haida Pledge is mentioned, and that encompasses everything from the way we act and outline the expectations of Haida Gwaii, and it often comes across the social media platforms as negative, and you'll read into people, but try not to. But the premise there is, as our elders told us, is respect the lands, respect the waters. Don't hurt the fish. If you're going to go fishing, catch what you can eat and take no more so that the next person can enjoy, for example. And whether it be the logging aspect, explaining to old loggers that happened to come on the trip that worked in Moresby Camp, for example, and remember those glory days, to how it's conducted through eco-based management today and companies like Ton Forest, is the cedar inventories. So we explain that culturally we have cedar inventories that protect our rights, but also offer opportunities for future generations. And for the most part, I would say 98% has been well received. And you'll get the odd person that's stubborn that happened to come along with his wife because she wanted to experience and enjoy it. But you know what? I'm sure their relationships changed for the positive after that. And so on a variety of different fronts. And that being said, it's a letter you get back in the mail that means so much. And I'm not one to post everything on social media, but it's like when someone takes the time and effort to write you a letter on how they enjoyed their experience and how their perspectives changed, then we've done our job. And we appreciate that. And we have lots of old timers, lots of youth, and it's such a privilege to be able to go with families that have 2, 3-year-olds and or 6-year-olds and just from all walks of life and take them on that journey and see them smile. And so those are some of the cues we watch for. And our team did a great job this year, and a shout out to all of them. And I hope that helped answer that question, sir. Hoa, thank you.
Thank you, James, for this answer. Just to be mindful of the time, I know that we are running a little bit late, but we have one more question from Jamie. I think that Jamie was on.
Hi, everyone. Jamie, Indigenous Tourism BC. Thank you so much, James, for this really special presentation. I did want to touch base on the Haida Gwaii pledge, and you definitely to ask that question. You answered a lot of my questions. So really, I was wondering, like, you know, when someone is booking their tour with you, is that pledge, is that part of the onboarding of your guests immediately, or is that something that takes place through their experience on the territory?
Thank you. At this time, we'll refer to the pledge. We've got to get to our website to integrate it, but we'd like to think you spending the day with us is our one-on-one pledge with you. And so we're going to capture those principles. And that's what we have to be mindful when it comes to these experiences. I'm not one for paperwork. Why? Because I know what working for the federal government's like. For example, when you come for this experience, you want it one-on-one. And so when either it's the orientation going into Guayhanas and the education aspects during the tour, we're sharing that with you along the way.
I love that.
And people feel more open to ask those questions like, well, I'm going up to Toe Hill later in the week. Am I going to get a bucket of agates, or am I going to find just one special? It's just sharing that so that they don't feel threatened per se, and that invitation, because we're about educating as a culture and hosting. We're very friendly people. Haida Gwaians alike as well as Islanders. And so it's just sharing that message and more on a one-on-one basis that incorporates many of the points in our Haida Pledge that you can find on the Council Haida Nation website and other sites as well. As you know, we've been a sport fishing mecca for decades, and the 50,000 plus sports fishermen that hit the island only to step on the tarmac and fly in a helicopter out to the lodge back in the early 80s to the mid 90s is, you know, we're seeing that change. And so we're seeing a change amongst many of our partners. We work with the sports fishing companies in that they're going to fish 3 days instead of 5 days. And you know what? They're going to spend that extra 2 days coming over to Kailnagai at the Haida Heritage Center, learning about who we are and who we are as an island, more importantly, because let's be honest, a big shout out to our neighbors. And it's to all our benefit in kind of closing this off, and that the efforts of Haida Gwaii, many of you learned of the Bill C-18, Haida title. Well, what does that mean? Well, simply put, at the end of the day, it's already in action. You've seen co-management in Guayhanas. It's been over 30 years, protecting a place for future generations, to looking to protect the entire island, but also have a sustainable economy moving forward. And so the beauty of Haida Gwaii is, as I used to say to, I like to be cheeky, and sometimes I have no filter, is we're one. And so, as I used to say to a long lost friend, we used to build canoes that could make it to the mainland, but you couldn't build canoes to get here. That being said, the uniqueness of Haida Gwaii being Haida is that we're able to do the government to government work through the details, and that knowledge is then shared elsewhere amongst other nations and communities across the province and our country. So it's
Thank you.
all interplay, and we're just one little piece of the puzzle, trying to do our best. So how for that question.
Very much, James.
I
And
could
thank you
stay here
for
all
all the
morning. This is
questions.
great.
We would have you forever.
I'll shave next time. See, I'm being sustainable here. I was telling the crew earlier, I didn't make down to go get a clamshell and some kelp so I can shave my beard, but or what appears to be a beard. I look like a Goodnai, and Goodnai and Hyatt is a sea urchin. So mwah to all of you.
Thank you again, James. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone who have stayed a little bit more after 11. We are very grateful for that. We are about to wrap up this workshop, and I would like to let you know that a video as well as a resource guide will be available right after this presentation. So the video, we have had the pleasure to interview Jenna Bauer, the General Manager and Commit Desert Cultural Center located in the Osoyos. This is an interpretative center, and it is operated by the Osoyos Indian band. Jenna has shared with us her experience regarding traditional ecological knowledge that Chatman has explained to you a little bit earlier in the presentation. Fantastic video that I would highly recommend, as well as the resource guide that will also be available. We have discussions with Paula Amos from Indigenous Tourism BC, as well as Candace Campo from Talisay Tours, and we'll talk a little bit more about how Indigenous knowledge is intertwined with climate resiliency across the BC's tourism industry. A little bit of a touch base about our next workshop, workshop number 5, on Wednesday, October 16th at 10 a.m. The theme will be decarbonization and climate action. Kayla will be sharing the link in the chat for registration. Please feel free to do it now. This is open. Also, please, you can also visit Destination BC project for the website for more information about the program and the upcoming workshops. Well, last but not least, we really appreciate your feedback so that we continue to improve our workshop series and future content. The link of this feedback form will be in the chat in a few seconds. Thank you very much, Kayla, for putting in. Also, should you have any questions about the project, please don't hesitate to reach out to the BC Tourism Climate Resiliency Initiative. The email will be put in the chat, destinationsstewardship@destinationsbc.ca. And once again, everyone, I would like to thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much, James, for this very, very insightful discussion and for your participation. It was a pleasure to have you all. Thank you very much for this workshop, and we are looking forward to welcoming you at the next one in October. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James.
Thank you.